Okay, so magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Good day to all of you. And for this presentation, I will be discussing the topic Learning Continues, Remote Teaching and Learning Concepts and Models. So this webinar session is exclusive to those enrolled in Module 1 of the Executive Course on Remote Teaching and Learning. So that's the reason why you are here. And it was this webinar session was announced only to those who registered in Module 1 of the course, Remote Teaching and Learning for the Executive. So as indicated here in this slide, I am Dr. Mel de la Peña Bandalaria, and I am professor at the UP Open University, and at the same time serving as its chancellor. I'm also serving as the coordinator for this module of the executive course. So I decided to have this webinar session to show some models in terms of how we can teach remotely. So as designed, this webinar series is synchronous, meaning to say I require that you as students of Module 1 be present in this online session. So this is one example by which we can do a remote teaching. So I prepared the PowerPoint and I requested for some technical support. And I'm doing this lecture right from home, directly from my home. So some of you enrolled in this course were not able to participate because of conflict in schedule. So that is something that we also need to consider when we design our courses like this. So there were conflicts in the schedule of our learners, and some of you who may have conflict did some adjustments in your schedule so you can also join us today. Also, you may have noticed that this webinar session was originally scheduled yesterday, May 25, but because it was declared a holiday, the session did not push through, as I also require some staff to be present to provide technical assistance in the conduct of the session. So that's another thing that we need to consider. When we do remote teaching, there may be some activities as a teacher that we cannot do alone. Somehow we need to request for technical assistance or some of our colleagues to be present also. But in some circumstances, you can also do it alone when you do your live broadcast using your own Zoom account. Of course, that is also possible. Now, another configuration, since the session will be recorded, those who were not able to join us can still watch the lecture later. So that's another thing that we need to consider. We know that in many instances, some of our learners will not be able to join us. So we have to provide that condition wherein they will not be put to a disadvantaged position. So in the case of this lecture, since it will be recorded, those who will not be able to join us in this session this morning will still be able to access it later in the asynchronous manner. So that means to say they will be watching it on their own time and will do the module activities also asynchronously. So as implied in this module, we are hoping that the mode of instruction that we will be doing is that we will be learning as we are doing the activities in this module. So just like in a classroom setting of which we are all familiar with, sit down, relax, and just be part of this conversation, okay? So when many areas in the country were put under total lockdown, that was last March, and many establishments were closed, including schools, we were all caught unprepared for what can be considered as unprecedented learning crisis that had to be addressed immediately. We were something like, hey, schools were closed, classes were suspended, so what do we need to do? School year was just about to end in basic education. That's elementary and high school. And for many higher education institutions, the semester was just in full swing. Like in the case of UP, we were just about on our second month of the entire semester. It was estimated that worldwide, there were about 90% of the student population affected because of this schools closing as a result of our being mindful of our health situation. Many of us can probably recall that in the past few years, talks in education focused largely on how we can align our curricular offerings to the demand of the fourth industrial revolution. I think many of you also participated in that kind of discussions. So the fourth industrial revolution, characterized by the fusion of advances in artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, genetic engineering, quantum computing, and other technologies that would result to something beneficial to people. In those discourses, there were also projections of what the world will be as the result of the convergence of the human minds with technologies. Somehow I could relate to this quote as shown in this slide that in 2020, we thought we'd have flying cars. Instead, we're teaching people how to wash their hands. Ironic, isn't it? That amidst talks of Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, there will be a sudden reboot, and we suddenly went back to the basics of how to survive. And our daily watch for numbers shifted from the lotto winning number combinations to the combinations of number of confirmed cases due to COVID, deaths, and recoveries. The COVID-19 pandemic has definitely disrupted our lives and our being. And how were the schools affected? These were the news that came into my feed in March. Harvard, other schools drop grades as classes go online. Of course, you are all familiar with this demand for mass promotion. Universities begin canceling in-person classes until 2021. Blended learning has been considered to be unleashing a revolution in education, and strategies are being put in place to ensure that students will have access to the internet as preparations for online teaching are starting. And these are in other countries. So let's take a look. In the case of the Philippines, specifically the higher education institutions. So we have more or less the same picture for higher education. The terms blended online, offline, and flexible learning had emerged to describe how classes will be conducted in the time of COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, the kind of education system we have, and this is not just for the Philippines alone, this is true worldwide, is that which requires the physical presence of both the teachers and the students in the same place at the same time, which automatically excludes some students, like those who are physically challenged and are facing constraints, which prevent them from being part of this conventional mode of instruction. Further, this mode of instruction cannot respond easily to circumstances that force closure, whether this is due to conflict, just like what we experience in Marawi, floods, or typhoons, which we often experience in our country, fires, or some other disasters like the Taal volcano eruption, which we experienced just recently, and pandemic, like what we are battling right now. In March, we have witnessed, and probably many of us experienced, that rush to shift to online learning. I read in one article that came out to describe what was happening, and I quote, "Due to the threat of COVID-19, schools, colleges, and universities are facing decisions about how to continue teaching and learning while keeping their faculty, staff, and students safe from a public health emergency that is moving so fast and not well understood. Many institutions have opted to cancel all face-to-face classes, as I have shown earlier, including laboratories and other learning experiences, and have mandated that faculty move their courses online to help prevent the spread of the virus that causes COVID-19. Moving instruction online can enable the flexibility of teaching and learning anywhere, anytime. But the speed with which this move to online instruction is expected to happen is unprecedented and staggering. I think you can also relate to this description that faculty, we teachers, might feel like instructional MacGyvers, having to improvise quick solutions in less than ideal circumstances. No matter how clever a solution might be, and some very clever solutions really emerge and are still emerging, many instructors will understandably find this process really stressful. I think many of us can relate to this feeling that we are stressed right now on how we can really shift to the kind of teaching and learning that will still put the safety of our students and of course ourselves also as the priority. I further quote the article which I read. In an effort to describe the kind of teaching and learning that is happening during that pressing time, remember way back in March, researchers and practitioners in educational technology have come up with the term emergency remote online teaching. So there's this another term, a new term which emerged, remote online teaching, to describe the sudden shift to online teaching outside the classroom, but without the usual preparations that are associated with a well-designed online teaching and learning, because there's this sudden shift. There was no time to prepare. We just needed to replicate the kind of classroom teaching that we are doing in the classroom. Online teaching was looked at as the most available and supposed to be fastest way of bringing teaching outside the classroom. Hence the term emergency remote online teaching. I think some of you may have heard of the term also. A professor friend from Indiana University, Professor Curtis Bonk, described this sudden shift to emergency remote online learning or teaching as forcing teachers to be at level 4 of online instruction, bypassing levels 1 to 3. He urged that with the time that we have now, that is before the opening of classes for the next school year, let's bring them back to at least levels 2 and 3, as we said, to make sure that learning continues effectively, even in the time of COVID-19 pandemic. That is our non-negotiable as coming from the education sector. We are now in the stage where the term emergency may no longer apply, but we still retain the term remote learning to continue the emphasis on the out-of-school learning from the student's perspective. This time we are being learner-centric because we are looking at the condition of our learners when we design the mode of instructional delivery that we will opt to have for our respective institutions. That means to say, we take the position of the learners in the planning that we should be making right now. Now let's take a closer look at what remote learning is. What is shown in the slide, the Commonwealth of Learning defines remote learning as an emergency measure which attempts to replicate the classroom teaching and learning process in an online mode, and can also be considered a form of distance education because of the physical separation between the teacher and the learners. So it can also be classified as a form of distance education because they share that basic characteristic or feature. Note the use of the terms emergency measure, replicate teaching and learning process in an online mode, which makes this term remote learning different from the usual distance education that we know and the kind of preparations that we are doing for the usual distance education mode of instructional delivery. The only similarity, as I have mentioned, is the physical separation between the learners and the teachers in time and space. Again, the reason why we cannot use the term distance education to encompass the thing that we are doing now, the shift to out of the classroom teaching and learning in response to COVID-19 pandemic. However, and we are also aware of this, given the uneven development of technologies in various countries, Philippines included, now we are becoming aware of how uneven the development and access to these technologies are in our country. Online learning cannot be seen as the only solution for remote, rural, and resource-poor communities. Hence the need to consider other flexible models of delivering instruction. But what are our options? So let's take a look at our options. One of the features of learning delivery mode that would be responsive to disruptions caused by disaster or even by pandemic, as what we are experiencing now, is flexibility. So of course, you have heard of this flexible learning option. So flexibility is a major feature or characteristic of the instructional mode of delivery that we will be choosing. We can look at flexibility to be a function of the level of ICT or information and communication technology integration as what is being shown in this simple illustration. The higher the level of ICT integration into the teaching and learning process, the more flexible the learning delivery mode will be. So as illustrated in this slide, face-to-face instruction has the lowest level of technology integration, and as such, the least flexible among the modes of instructional delivery. In most cases, the technologies being integrated are the non-digital. Although we are already seeing an increase in the e-technologies and even digital or online network technologies in some of our classroom settings. The next level of flexibility is the blended learning with different models of blending, the mode of instruction to be offline, online, and even technology blending to conduct the different learning activities, but still partly within the confine of the classroom and partly off classroom or some online activities, as in the case of flipped classroom model. In this case, there is already some flexibilities in the way instruction is delivered to the students. A bigger or higher level of flexibility can be seen in a full distance education mode. And as we can see, there are different terminologies associated with distance education. We look at open and distance e-learning, or ODEL, as the most flexible and with the highest level of technology integration. But before we go into the different models of the delivery, of instructional delivery, let's first take a look at the definitions or descriptions of these different terminologies associated with the different models of delivering instruction. And from there, develop the model of remote teaching that will be appropriate to our own context. So let's take a look. First, I have mentioned the term flexible learning, which has been defined in the literature as teaching and learning anywhere, anytime. The way CHED, the Commission on Higher Education, used the term flexible learning options implies that this is the general term to describe the different models or options of delivering instruction, which is the alternative to the conventional face-to-face or classroom instruction that we are all familiar with. Citing the Australian National Training Authority, flexible learning expands choice on what, when, where, and how people learn. It is a learner-centered approach to education that covers a range of delivery modes. So in here, there is already that recognition of the wide range of delivery modes, including distance education, mixed mode delivery, e-learning, online learning, self-paced learning, and self-directed learning. So let's try to understand further. Of course, we are all familiar with the face-to-face instruction. I mean, probably all of us have completed our education, our training using this mode of instruction, the face-to-face, which we also refer to as the conventional mode of teaching. There is that learning environment where the students and the teachers are both physically present in the classroom. The picture in the lower side of the slide, I can say is one of my favorite pictures if I really want to overemphasize the role of technology in instruction, whether it is in the classroom or outside the classroom, or whether the technology is a simple e-technology like a projector, a television, a computer, which has become a common fixtures in our classrooms at present. So this is for the face-to-face instruction. We are also familiar with the blended learning, and probably many are already using this mode of instruction, especially the flipped classroom. As defined, blended learning refers to a strategic, take note of these terms, strategic and systematic approach to combining times and modes of learning, integrating the best aspects of face-to-face and online interactions using appropriate information and communication technologies. Note the emphasis on the terms strategic and systematic to differentiate it to just moving your classes online because classes were suspended because there was a typhoon or there was a flood, etc. Another definition that I always use when discussing blended learning is it being a formal education program in which a student learns, at least in part, through the online delivery of content and instruction, with some element of student control over time, place, path, and pace. So there is already that level of flexibility because you already give the student that kind of control on when, where, and how, what pacing will he or she be learning the lesson. So in part, it will be a supervised brick and mortar location. And blended learning includes an intentional shift to online instructional delivery for a portion of the course to boost learning. So there is this overall objective of boosting the learning process. The reason why you are shifting or integrating some online resources to your face-to-face or classroom teaching. The illustration I included in this slide implies that blended learning should be something like this. It should be a work of art and not just a hodgepodge of online, offline at the whim of the teacher. Note the emphasis on boost learning, and if I may also add, quality instruction. We will be discussing that later into this presentation. Let's now take a look at distance education. As implied by the term, distance education is a mode of instructional delivery, I have mentioned this earlier, whereby the teacher and the learner are separated in time and space, and the instruction is delivered through specially designed materials. Again, there is that emphasis on the spatially designed instructional materials and methods using appropriate technologies and learning management systems, and supported by organizational and administrative structures and arrangements. Note the emphasis on the phrases separated in time and space, which is the basic feature of this mode of instruction and a feature which should be considered as a response mechanism in this time of COVID-19 pandemic. There is also the emphasis, as I've mentioned earlier, on specially designed materials and methods, which implies that just uploading your lecture notes online may not be classified under this mode of instruction. That's why there is this emphasis on the use of remote learning if our goal or objective is just to replicate the classroom teaching that we are doing for our courses. Also, distance education enables learning to take place from a distance virtually and differently from the conventional classroom or traditional mode. In designing the learning in distance education, we also take into consideration the context of the learner and in most cases also take that as a leveling of or a cue on how we are designing the learning in distance education. So what about e-learning? In general, e-learning can refer to learning that is enabled electronically. So that's a very generic definition of e-learning. Hence, especially during the early years of using this term, e-learning can happen even inside the classroom. This is the reason why UPOU came up with the term distance e-learning or DEL to differentiate it from classroom e-learning and to further emphasize the role of technologies in both instances on how technology can bridge that geographical and physical distance between the teacher and the learner in the case of distance education mode of delivering instruction. Through the years, however, e-learning has become synonymous with online learning. So don't be surprised if now, if you are hearing the term e-learning, this will also refer to online learning, which implies the necessity of having access to the internet or network technologies. Hence the definition, a new method of education involving technologies that allow the student to complete a course outside of the traditional classroom. These technologies hinge on the internet and its ability to reach students many miles from a physical university or school. So, and that's the reason why there is this another definition of e-learning, which already implies the access or the need to access the internet so that you can continue the learning process. There are also terms that probably you are familiar with or you have heard of, and these are home-based learning and modular learning. For the basic education, those who are teaching at that level, I'm sure you have heard of this also. So home-based learning, there is the emphasis on the presence of someone qualified to supervise the learning process. There are already many organizations providing home-based learning curriculum. But there is this emphasis on the presence of someone qualified to supervise the learning process. They could be the parents, guardians, or tutors who have undergone relevant training. In home-based learning, you buy the whole curriculum. Hence, the task of teaching the curriculum rests on the tutor or the parents. And that's the reason why they have to undergo specific or relevant training for this purpose. In modular instruction, the emphasis is on the kind of instructional materials prepared for this mode of instruction, which the learner should complete by module. In distance education, if you have heard also of the term module, I think this also emerged from this mode of instruction, the modular instruction. Students engage themselves in learning concepts presented in the modules, and the teaching and learning process can happen online or using the non-digital and digital instructional materials. The modular instruction is best exemplified, like I think you are also familiar with the language courses that are also common now. At this point, I also would like to introduce two more terms: open learning and open distance e-learning. Open learning is a philosophy which espouses the removal of barriers to learning. It is quality assured, open to people, methods, places, and ideas, and is highly flexible, learner-centered, and it enables the student to learn at the time, place, and pace which satisfy his or her circumstances and requirements. So there's no more barrier to learning, and it's an opportunity that we really want, and we are really advocating for something like inclusive education. We can look at open distance e-learning, or ODEL, as the most flexible among the modes of delivering instruction. This model, which was articulated by the UP Open University in 2012, describes what the university is doing. It represents the convergence of the philosophy of open learning, or removing the barriers to learning, distance education as the mode of instructional delivery, and e-learning, which maximizes the affordances of modern information and communication technologies, specifically the internet, of course, to deliver instructional content and learner support. So what options do we have to ensure that learning will continue in this time of COVID-19 pandemic? We have heard that DepEd recommended 5 learning delivery options. I've read this somewhere under its learning continuity plan for 2020-2021, depending on the health status of the locality. These modes are blended learning, distance learning, homeschooling, apprenticeship, and face-to-face. Of course, the face-to-face is something that every school is now really considering very carefully, given that many areas in the country are really not free from COVID-19. Homeschooling and apprenticeship have their specific requirements. What deserves further scrutiny are the blended learning and distance learning, which can provide the flexible learning options that we can consider. Note that in these models that I will be discussing, the media format of the instructional materials was the determinant or the major factor considered. that is taking into consideration the access to the internet and to the computer of our students. Because we have heard of this concern that how can we implement online learning when many of our students, not just students, even the teachers, don't have easy access to the internet. And even for some of our students, no access to the computer or even mobile devices. So for blended teaching and learning, we can have the following combinations. Note that in this modes of instruction, I still included the face-to-face. The face-to-face. So the first is the face-to-face plus remote, wherein the remote or outside the classroom instruction can be in the form of non-digital or offline resources like printed materials or books. Of course, we are aware our students don't have access to the internet. So the usual books that we have, give it to them, and that will contain the lessons that they need to learn for a given time. Under this model, the assumption is the learners do not have access to the internet nor to the computer. Radio and TV instruction can also be considered under this model in the event that these resources are available in the locality. So we have heard of this also, that some communities, some localities are considering the use of radio and TV to address that problem of accessing the internet for many of our students. Under this mode of instruction, the percentage of face-to-face and remote instruction does not have to be 50-50. The face-to-face instructions can be scheduled, taking into consideration the restrictions in space as dictated by the physical distancing. The face-to-face session can be the venue or platform to submit class requirements or even do a sit-down or proctored assessment to assess learning and monitor students' academic progress. This form of blended learning can also be looked at as somehow similar to correspondence school or the first generation distance education, where the printed materials are supplemented with a once a month face-to-face session in a study center. The second model is the face-to-face plus remote, where the remote instruction or instructional materials can be through a combination of a digitized meaning to say they are not, we just transform them into the digital format, but offline, and non-digitized or non-digital instructional materials like the books or the magazines. The digital offline resources can be in the form of video materials contained in USBs or CDs. This is especially important if the learning goals require the teaching of skills or the learning of lessons, which can be facilitated through the multimedia format. The non-digital resources can still be in the form of books and other printed materials like the magazines. This mode of instructional delivery is appropriate for learners who may not have access to the internet, but have access to computers either at home, in a public library, or a community center. Just like in the previous model, model number 1, the value of the face-to-face session can be in the terms of submission of requirements and sit-down or proctored exams or assessment. In the third model, there is already the integration or incorporation of online component with the offline instructional materials. The offline instructional materials can be printed books or offline digital materials like videos or podcasts in CDs or USBs. The online component can be synchronous, like online lectures, just like what we are doing now, or synchronous session through a learning management system or LMS, where the academic interactions or formative assessments like online quizzes, self-assessment questions, collaborative work, etc. can be done. The LMS is a tool to monitor or check the progress of the student. Again, in this model, the face-to-face session can be used for sit-down or proctored assessment or examinations. The fourth model of blended learning or teaching is the combination of face-to-face and the remote, where the remote learning is fully online. Instructional materials are digital materials, and internet is required to access or download them. Further, a learning management system is critical to provide the platform for the different learning activities, like the learner-learner interaction, the learner-teacher interaction, and the learner-content interaction. Formative assessments can also take place online or through the learning management system. The LMS is also a tool or a platform to monitor or check the progress of the students. Again, under this mode of instructional delivery, the face-to-face session can be used for sit-down or proctored summative assessment. For the remote teaching and learning, this is something that is recommended if it is really not possible to hold face-to-face sessions. And I think this is true for many areas in the country now. So we now consider the different models under the remote teaching and learning, wherein, as mentioned earlier, the face-to-face classroom will be replicated using the relevant technologies. As defined earlier, in the remote teaching and learning, there is already the assumption that the learners have access to the internet. The first model can be considered is the combination of offline or the non-digital materials like the print plus online learning activities. The online learning activities can be synchronous, just like what we're doing in the lecture, or asynchronous, which can happen in a learning management system. The offline and non-digital instructional materials like books, magazines, etc. will contain the lessons that the students should learn. So all the other interactions can happen online, which will include submission of course requirements, collaborative works, as well as formative and summative assessments. In the second model, the difference is the inclusion of digital materials into the learning package, like the video materials or podcasts with the non-digital. So there's already that combination of materials here. Just like in the first model, the online learning activities can also be through the learning management system, and both formative and summative assessments will also have to be done online. So again, let's take note that in differentiating these different modes or models of instructional delivery, the form or the media use for the instructional materials are the main or is the main consideration. Under the remote teaching and learning mode of instructional delivery, there is already the opportunity to integrate in the purely online mode of instructional delivery, integrate in the teaching learning process the open educational resources as part of our course instructional materials. The shift to remote teaching and learning requires essential components like the trained teacher, a well-prepared student, and since teaching and learning will happen with the teacher and student separated in time and space, there has to be a way to bridge that physical separation through the use of appropriate information and communication technologies and a well-designed or well-packaged instructional materials. All these elements should be contained in the strategic plan of the educational institution. So again, let's take a look at them, these essential components, one by one. The trained teacher. For the trained teacher, I think we are all familiar with this TPCK model of technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge forwarded by Mishra and Kohler. We can say that content knowledge is already a given for teachers as part of their training during their undergraduate years. Pedagogy is probably also a given, only the need to apply it in the context of remote teaching or that the learners are not in the same classroom as the teacher. In the current context, the technological knowledge can be considered as the critical one given the wide array of ICTs which can be used to deliver instruction and support the learning of the students at a distance. The familiarity with these technologies and their affordances can very well help the teachers perform their tasks under a given model of remote teaching and learning. The other aspect of being a trained teacher is designing and delivering instruction under the selected model of remote teaching and learning. Given the distance, the student should have the complete learning package or instructional materials to guide him or her in his learning journey towards accomplishing the learning goals. Still on the trained teacher, in a survey entitled Kumusta Ka Teacher, conducted by the Asia Foundation Philippines, probably some of you are familiar with this, teachers said they need some help in addressing various concerns. Should their respective schools make use of the various flexible learning options when classes resume in the next school year? Results of the survey show that 65% of the respondents noted that they need help in teaching strategies for distance learning. So what are the teaching strategies that I can do? 62% said that they need assistance in designing suitable assessments and evaluation for distance learning. A total of 57% also said that they need help in preparing lessons and materials for distance learning. 55% said that they need assistance in reproduction of materials for this mode of instruction. 54% need help in collecting student works and monitoring submissions, and 42% need assistance in looking for more teacher resources. So these are the sentiments or the expressed needs of our teachers when they do this shift to remote teaching and learning, and which our school administrators or school officials should take into consideration when planning for the training of their teachers. Now, for the prepared students, we have to note that this mode of instruction is also something new for our students. They should understand why this shift to remote learning is necessary, and why, especially for the younger, for the children, why they can no longer be with their classmates and school friends just like before. In this preparation, parents or guardians will have to be involved, and their role as partners in the learning process will have to be emphasized. So there's this emotional preparation, psychological preparation, as well as technologically preparing them so that they can use the available technologies, the internet, the computer, for learning, and not just probably many of them are using it for some other purposes, but not specifically for learning in a well-designed curriculum, just like in formal education. The other critical component of remote teaching and learning is that which will bridge the geographical or physical distance between the teacher and the learner. I put here the appropriate educational technologies like the Google Meet, Zoom, just like what we're using now, Skype, and even Facebook Live for synchronous online sessions or lectures by the teacher. The learning management system is also important as it will serve as the classroom where teacher and students meet and interact. For the instructional materials or course package, we can refer back to the models of delivering instruction, which we discussed earlier, and where the format of the instructional materials determines the model as a function of the access to the internet by the student. As defined, instructional materials are the content or information conveyed within a course. These include the lectures, readings, textbooks, multimedia components, and other resources in a course. These are the materials which we teachers usually use in a face-to-face or conventional teaching, but which have to be redesigned for effective remote teaching and learning. And because our students are no longer with us in the classroom, so we have to redesign, we have to transform, we have to translate these materials so that they can be effective even if our students are not with us in the classroom. The best instructional materials is something that we always have to consider, are aligned with all other elements in the course, including the learning objectives, the assessments, and all the learning activities. Note that the teacher has the responsibility of designing learning and putting together the materials to provide the student the instructional content and everything that he or she has to learn throughout the school year or the semester. At this point, I would like to introduce two more terms or concepts. Hopefully, the future webinar, the future courses will be discussing these two concepts in detail: the course guide and the study guide. I think many of you are familiar with the term course syllabus. That's what we are using in the residential instruction, and which can be your starting point in putting together the instructional material package. The course guide is the document which provides the student with a blueprint on how to go about the course. It contains the list of lessons which will be tackled throughout the school term, the semester, the schedule, especially if there are still the face-to-face sessions, the course requirements, the deadlines for the submission of these requirements, how will they be submitted, etc. This document provides an overview of how the course will be. The study guide, on the other hand, is a more detailed discussion of the lesson and how the other components of the instructional package will be used. For instance, for the lesson on photosynthesis, the teacher can direct the student to read a specific chapter or pages in the book provided to the student. Like if what you have provided to the student is just a printed material, then there has to be that document which will guide the student on how the chapters or the content of the book will be used. So for a specific lesson, the teacher can put in the study guide, read chapter so and so, or pages so and so, which will discuss the lesson about photosynthesis as the example given. So, if there is a video material provided to the student, in the case of CD, or in the case of online, a link or a URL was provided, then the student can also be directed to that learning material, like view this video material, which you can access through this link. And there can also be a learning activity after reading or viewing a specific material. So like for instance, taking a quiz in the through the learning management system, do a simple experiment where the materials needed are accessible right in the home front, or participate in an online discussion presenting the results of the said experiment. Note that these learning activities will also keep the students engaged, which is very critical in a remote learning environment. Earlier, I mentioned that this can also be an opportunity to integrate the online learning, integrate open educational resources as part of the instructional package given to the student. And this could further enrich the teaching and learning environment. Further, if online learning can already be integrated into the whole course delivery process or into the remote teaching and learning, even the universal design for learning, the basic features of UDL, can also be integrated into the whole design of the course. So these features, the UDL principles and features, can make learning more accessible and inclusive to the different types of learners, and can make the learning process more personalized to the different students in our course. Another component of the bridge is the learner support system, which can be in the form of technical support, especially if the online component is already part of the delivery mode, and can also be looked at in terms of providing the sense of belongingness to learners who suddenly find themselves isolated from the usual learning environment provided by the conventional or face-to-face instruction. I mean, many literature already show that this is something that we really need to address when we do distance education or remote teaching and learning, that suddenly the students find themselves alone, isolated. But this should not be the case, and the learner support has to be designed as well to prevent that from happening on the part of the student. In some instances, the learner support also includes calling the students one by one, asking how they are, and if they are encountering learning difficulties. I am sure you are all aware of the resistance to online teaching. So we have read about it, that they don't want online learning to happen. There were even this proposal to really cancel the next school year because they don't want to go online. And probably part of the resistance can be due to the perception that online learning is of low quality, or even distance education is a lower quality instruction. However, and this is something that we really need to emphasize, just like in a conventional mode of instruction, distance education, and this is where remote teaching and learning can borrow some principles from distance education. There are already established QA frameworks, which include the following pillars, like the qualifications of the teachers. That's why we really emphasize that aside from the basic training of the teachers, all our teachers who will be doing this shift to remote teaching and learning should be trained to the kind of instruction that they will be doing when they shift to the remote teaching and learning. They should have the capability to design and deliver training in the remote mode of instruction. Of course, the instructional materials. What kind of instructional materials are we giving to our students? If they are quality instructional materials, then that is a one strategy of ensuring that the kind of instruction that we are giving to our students are of quality instruction. And if there is already the online component, the technology or infrastructure is also a component of quality or a pillar of quality. If you declared that you are an online university, or you will be doing online instruction, then you have to make sure that your technology is well and up and running. I mean, you cannot have your learning management system not accessible. As I always say in our university, when we declare that we are an online university, our learning management system should be 99.9% up. And if there will be cases that we will not be accessible, then due to upgrading, etc., then that should be announced in advance. So as to prepare both the teachers and the students in terms of the online activities that they have scheduled for their classes. Learner support and assessment are also pillars of quality in remote teaching and learning or distance education. Assessment specifically. It is important that the subsystems be designed and developed to ensure the quality of instruction in whatever model of remote teaching and learning your institution will adopt. Of course, there are also other pillars of quality for remote teaching and learning, for online instruction, but at least these are the basic pillars that we really need to consider as we now start planning for this shift to remote teaching and learning or online teaching. As teachers begin to shift toward remote teaching and learning, their initial steps can be built upon what they already know from face-to-face instruction. So let us take stock of what we already know, what we are already doing. There is now this opportunity. Note that there is now this opportunity to redefine the learning with the technology tools that will be made available to us, and transform the traditional learning environment, processes, and products. At this point, I would like to discuss in brief this SAMR model, which provides a guideline for explaining the digital transformation. If there will be an opportunity for us to integrate this the digital learning into our teaching process, then let us take this opportunity. So the four levels are substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. I'm sure some of you are already doing some of this, like the substitution, which is merely replacing the traditional methods of instruction with digital tools. So instead of reading a printed textbook, the students are printing out their own pages from an online textbook. So there is that substitution. Instead of me doing my lecture, I can probably show some video materials in my classroom, or get some slides from the internet. Instruction is at the augmentation level when the use of technology benefits are commonly performed tasks, such as having students submit their work online instead of turning their papers or submitting the papers directly to the teacher. So you are already augmenting it with some online activities. The modification level, there is a significant change between what happens in the traditional classroom and the digital ecosystem. So the example is like, for instance, the students submit the requirements online, and we also give our feedback online for immediacy of the students receiving our feedback to their submitted work. So there's already the modification to the kind of activities that we are doing inside the classroom. The redefinition is at the highest level, wherein our students are already creating content using the digital tools. So let's take a look. We can do this slowly. We can do this different levels as we try to translate the materials that we are using in the face-to-face classroom, translate them so that they will be more appropriate to remote teaching. So we can start with substitution, even if it's just substitution, augmentation, and up to the level of modification. But I'm sure many of you will be creative enough to already ask the students up to the level of redefinition, when they will already be creating content and hopefully sharing this content to other learners. So this is just an example of how we can transform our teaching learning process and take this shift to remote teaching and learning, so that this redefinition of the learning process from the usual face-to-face or conventional mode of instruction can happen. And then from there, even after the pandemic, this is something that we can already be doing even with the prevalence of the classroom or the face-to-face instruction. At this point, let me also point you to some useful resources as you go or as you do this shift from conventional classroom or face-to-face instruction to remote teaching and learning. This material, this is a very new material published by the Commonwealth of Learning. It provides detailed instructions on general guidelines for educational institutions. How should educational institutions prepare for this mode of instruction? Guidelines for academic, the teachers and support staff, guidelines for students, and guidelines for parents. I mean, these are very detailed instructions, and which can provide us with some directions on how we, given the role that we have in the shift to online teaching, what are the things that we need to do. Note that this material is an open access material. You can access it for free. You can Google it, download it, and read it. Keep a copy of it, and make it as some sort of a reference material in your preparation to the online teaching and learning. As my last reminder, in whatever mode of delivering instruction we may adopt, let us make sure that this will not happen. We have to ensure inclusion and equity in both access to the learning opportunity that we are providing. We need to note also that there is this resistance to online learning, because they are saying that many students will really be disadvantaged. That is true. So therefore, we need to really package our instructional content such that this, what is shown in this picture, will not happen. Some will have access, some will not have access, and some will not be able to have the learning outcomes that we plan for our courses. So we have to ensure that there is equity not only in access, but also in achieving the learning outcomes. So I guess that's my last slide. I also would like to point you to the other sides, which we are putting, where we are putting all our initiatives in this fight against COVID-19. We have our website, upou.edu.ph. The networks.upou.edu.ph, which is the online repository of open educational resources. I mean, this is where you can access many materials which you can use for teaching. And we also have the model.upou.edu.ph, which is our platform. I mean, you are all familiar with this because this is where our course is hosted, model.upou.edu.ph, and where all our free online training is happening. So after this module, you will also see the other modules under the executive course for remote teaching and learning. That's for the administrators. We will also have the free online courses for the teachers. We will also have the free online courses for the technical team of the university or our school, which can provide us with the technical support if online component is something that we will integrate into the mode of instructional delivery that we will have. So we are hoping that these resources will be useful to you, school administrators, to the teachers, as we continue our planning for this shift to remote teaching and learning. So that ends my presentation. And again, as I have mentioned earlier, the recorded material will also be uploaded in our course site. Note that there will be a learning activity that will be posted in the course site, and you need to complete this learning activity so that you will be given the certificate of module completion. So I think at this point, I'm not so sure. Will we be able to entertain questions from the audience? If I think you can also ask questions. Can we ask our host? Is there a possibility that our audience can also be asking questions?
Good morning, Chancellor.
Yeah. Is there a possibility of that they can also ask questions?
Yes, ma'am, they can post the questions in the chat box of the webinar.
Okay. Okay. So if you have questions to our viewers right now, you can post your questions in the chat box. But if there are no questions, or if you can, if you need time, or the question would come to you, you would think of it later, then probably you can also post the question in our course site. So that is also a possibility. So let's give some minutes. While we're waiting for the questions, may I also remind our learners that in the executive course, we have 3 modules. This is the first module. There are 2 more modules. Module 2 is on quality assurance, and module 3 is the strategic planning. In order for you to be given the certificate of the executive course completion, of the executive course on remote teaching and learning, you need to complete the 3 modules. So you will be given a certificate of completion for each module, and completing the final requirement would entitle you to the certificate of completion of the executive course on remote teaching and learning. Please note also that you need to register for each module. So registering in module 1 will not automatically register you to module 2 and 3. So you need to go through the process of registering to these modules again. So are there questions at this point? So there is this question. Learners are heterogeneous in terms of access to technology as well as access to qualified tutors at home. Okay, I think yeah. So how do we ensure the same quality of teaching and learning? I think probably we need to. I agree that there is this unevenness when it comes to the resources available to our students. So the first thing that we need to look into is the kind of material that we will provide to our students. So like for instance, the access to technology, we have to note that yes, there is this difference in the access to technology. So let's see what kind of material can we provide. So these are the same content. There may also be some opportunities for those who do not have access directly at their home to internet, for instance. If they can go to a public library where there is an internet access, of course, there is still that consideration here, especially if the area is still in total lockdown and children, especially for the basic ed, those below 21 years old are not allowed to go out. So yeah, in this aspect, a carefully designed instructional package will somehow ensure or provide some strategy to make sure that our learners will have access to the same content. In terms of the qualified tutor, well, that is something really that is available for those who are privileged and not available for those who are not privileged. In here, we are also looking at especially those at the basic ed and at the public schools. So really very, very different available support system. So in those circumstances, what kind of support system can we provide to the students who are disadvantaged in terms of access to technology and resources? There was one article that I read wherein there is this recommendation that we do not give grades to the student during the time of pandemic. Something like, if you will be grading students during this time, you are also grading the privilege, just like what you are mentioning. So it is up to us, the university, the school, what will be, how are we going to approach this kind of situation? But as a teacher, as an institution, I would say that let us start with a well-designed package taking into consideration the availability of support system to our student. And then let us address the other aspects of support system as they differ from across our students. Another question, can we teachers as subject matter experts just prepare the learning materials? Actually, I have a problem there because the IT department can only can only like for instance convert the material from this to this. But when we say designing the learning materials, it will also include the learning activities which have to take into consideration the remoteness or the physical separation. So this is something that the IT department cannot do. I mean, when it comes to designing. But when it comes to converting materials, uploading them into the learning management system, then probably the IT department can do. But the design of the materials, the learning activities, to make sure that they are aligned with objectives, to make sure that they are appropriate for remote teaching and learning, to make sure that they are aligned with the assessment, will have to be done by the teachers who are subject matter experts. Why do you think some people look at distance education? Well, actually, this is something ano yan eh nung unang-unang panahon pa, wherein education was looked at as something for the privileged and the few, those who can afford. And then the correspondence school, the first generation distance education, were really put in place to provide learning opportunities to the disadvantaged group. And because there is no physical meeting Hindi nakikita yung teacher tsaka yung estudyante, and they equate quality with the physical meeting, face-to-face meeting of the teachers and students. So they look at distance education as something that is low quality, and that is something that we really that we really want to how do you call that, get that perception out of the whole system, because that's simply not true, especially when you design the learning, when you design your materials very carefully and you use the appropriate technology to deliver the instructional content. So yun yung pinagmulan, noong pagtingin sa online teaching or distance education as of lower quality because of that perception. But given the modern information and communication technologies that we have now, we are really saying that, in fact, of course, I am biased here. In fact, online teaching and learning can be of better quality than face-to-face, a poorly designed face-to-face or classroom instruction, because you have many available resources in the internet and quality resources in the internet which you can use or integrate into your learning materials. How much time is ideal for synchronous learning and asynchronous learning per academic subject in a given day? There were already studies about this. How much time can we ask of our students to do synchronous learning like this one? Especially for the the children, they're saying that probably 30 minutes is just enough for them to do a synchronous same time lecture session like we are having now. But probably for older people, for the college level students, then it can probably be 1 hour or 2 hours, but not yung hindi magkasunod, kasi especially meron din silang sinabi na if your video is on, mas nakakapagod daw yon kapag so sometimes they are also advising na kapag ka nagmi-meeting, huwag na kayong mag-on ng mga video ninyo kasi mas nakakapagod daw na naka-on ang video material. So ang asynchronous, ang lagi namin sinasabi, let us try to anchor the learning session to what we are doing in the residential instruction. So like for instance, a subject is only for an hour, MWF. Then let us initially try to design the synchronous and asynchronous sessions along that line, but not too much synchronous sessions like the one that we are having now. If our students are required to be in classes 6 hours a day, then probably we can ask them to do some asynchronous activities in the learning management system during the day as well. And let us design our teaching content along that line. In the case of UP Open University, when we develop our materials or our course content, we are also anchoring it to the usual 3-unit credit course to the student. And that is 48 hours of face-to-face contact to with our students. So parang ganun din yung ginagawa namin para lang hindi natin mag-over-require sa mga estudyante natin. Meron din tayong sinasabi na minsan akala natin since online yan, lahat ng maisip natin na activity pwede nating ipagawa. So isipin din natin, especially for basic ed din, ano ba yung primary learning goal that we should achieve, and let us focus the learning activities for the achievement of that particular learning goal. So yung mga nice to do activities, wag na muna nating isipin yon. Ang isipin na lang natin, what are the major learning activities that we should ask our students to do so that they will achieve the learning goal that we have set for the course. So yun siguro yung maging anchor natin when it comes to doing synchronous and asynchronous learning for academic subject. So not too much synchronous sessions, but we can design more asynchronous activities, like for instance, probably one hour per course, uh, that we usually teach in a day. So kung sa isang araw, ito yung mga kurso niya, i-design din natin na may mga ganito silang i-devote na learning activities for that particular course or in a week. It will also help our students, yung bigyan natin sila ng calendar, what they should be accomplishing for a particular day, for a particular week. Ganyan, bigyan natin sila ng mga schedule para sila mismo ay ma-keep track nila yung progress nila doon sa kanilang mga klase. So like week 1, ito dapat ang mga schedule natin, etc. Dapat natapos mo na tong assignment na to at isasubmit mo sa schedule na to. So let us give them that kind of scheduling, pacing as well. Some tips on how to look on what to look for in a good learning management system. Yung what to look for in a good learning management system, ang usual na ibinibigay nating tip dito, ano ba yung mga activities na kailangan natin? Ano ba yung mga learning activities na kailangan natin? In the case of UPOU, when we give webinar sessions like this, we usually recommend open source materials, especially for schools that are resource with limited resources. So yung Google Classroom, if you are subscriber to G Suite, it can provide you with many features already that can assist or help in the teaching learning process. So pwede na yon. Sa case na UPOU, we are using Moodle. Libre din yan, but you need a good technical team for the customizing and yung especially in working for the hosting services, especially kung cloud hosting na ang ginagawa natin. So, ang unang titingnan natin, ano ba yung mga online activities na gusto natin gawin, at yun ang magiging basihan natin kung anong klaseng learning management system yung ating kukuhanin. Marami na pong libreng management system ngayon. So marami na tayong choices. And again, depende kung ano ang resources na meron yung ating mga eskwelahan. Another question, if flexible learning allows students to learn at their own time and place, does this mean that the course will not follow? There is, siguro there is a limitation here on the kind of pacing that we allow our students. So like for instance, kapag in a face-to-face or a conventional classroom, something like if the schedule of the class is 8 to 9 MWF, we require our students to be present 8 to 9 MWF in the classroom with us. But in a flexible learning option, the student can engage with the content. Kung wala namang synchronous online sessions katulad ng ginagawa natin ngayon, the student can decide, mamayang gabi ko ito gagawin. Kung ako ay merong ginagawa ngayon, pwede ko itong gawin mamayang gabi, mamayang hapon, and I will still be able to achieve the learning goals. Magagawa ko pa rin yung mga course requirements. Saan ko gagawin? Pwedeng nasa bahay ako, pwedeng nasa library ako, pwedeng nasa sasakyan ako. Kasi meron naman akong access dun sa mobile gadget. So yun po yung limit noong sinasabi natin na own pace and time. If you are really into open learning, then tinatanggal natin lahat yun. Tinatanggal natin yung mga deadlines, tinatanggal natin yung mga ganong klase ng barriers. But we suggest that in the case of the kind of learning delivery that we are looking into in this time of COVID, we suggest that you provide your students with a schedule. There is just the flexibility na ang deadline ko nito ay sa Friday pa. Siyempre yung kultura ng mga estudyante natin magkakram yan. So kung Friday ang deadline yan, gagawin niya yan baka Friday pa ng hapon kasi yung Friday na hanggang alas 11 ng gabi, hanggang alas 12 ng gabi ay Friday pa rin yun. So na-meet pa rin niya yung deadline, hindi pa rin siya late in submission. So yung mga ganong klase ng flexibility ang naibibigay natin sa mga estudyante in terms of choosing the time, the place, and the pace of learning. But if we really want to remove all those things, then let us consider the open learning model. Yes, ito yung next question. Our main challenge are those subjects that have laboratories, hands-on application. Totoo po 'yon. Ang merong yung of course hindi ito maaring applicable sa lahat ng laboratory classes. Yung isang tinitingnan ngayon, yung immersive technologies like the augmented reality, virtual reality, yan yung mga tinitingnan ngayon ng mga possibilities for laboratory courses. For yung sa chemistry lab activities, ang pwedeng gawin dito, baka dito nyo pwedeng tingnan yung blended learning kung saan yung mga actual na kailangan na nilang gawin at hindi nila kayang gawin remotely using halimbawa yung mga chemicals na available sa bahay, kung suka man yan, tubig, etc. Kung hindi nila magagawa doon at kailangan talaga na nasa laboratory, baka ito ang inyong i-consider na blended technology. But let us explore to the limit the use of video materials, yung mga synchronous sessions na katulad nito, kung saan ipapakita din ng mga estudyante yung mga skills that they have acquired or they need to learn in laboratory courses. Now, if there is already that hindi na talaga pwede, then let us consider the face-to-face, but with the with ensuring that the health and safety of our teachers and students will not be compromised. Meron din mga tinatawag na mga learning centers. Kung masyadong malayo yung mga estudyante, probably we can partner with other educational institutions, other organizations for these other learning activities to happen. So kung masyadong malayo yung estudyante, kailangan niyang gawin itong activity na to, then let's try to partner with other institutions for these activities to happen. What are the qualifications of an online teacher? Are training and seminars enough? Well, actually, opo, training seminars enough to qualify as an online teacher. Kasi po, halimbawa po, katulad namin, kami naman po ay nagsimula na hindi naman kami online teacher. In fact, ako nga po, hindi nga po ako talaga teacher. May basic training is in agriculture and communication, ganyan. Pero nag-undergo, we have trainings on online teaching and learning. Lahat po sa UPOU, for instance, bago ka magturo, yung mga tutors din namin, bago ka bigyan ng mga teaching and tutorial assignment, you have to undergo series of training sessions to really equip you with the knowledge and skills for this mode of instruction. Syempre medyo matagal, hindi naman matagal. Hindi mo makukuha kaagad. May maraming adjustment na gagawin para mo masabi talaga na before you can really say that I am comfortable with this mode of instruction. Even when we were starting, for instance, when students submit assignments to us online, ang ginagawa po namin, ipiniprint pa po namin yon, and then iginigrade namin yun sa papel. It also took us some time before we had that the skill to review documents online, give comments online, send all this feedback online. It also took us some time. But with the constant practice, constant engagement to this kind of instructional delivery, medyo ito na rin yung naging comfort zone. And having printed materials, medyo yun na yung hindi komportable sa amin. Nawawala na namin yung mga materials namin pagka printed. Mas maganda na nandito na lang sa aming laptop, and then we can access them immediately and share them easily. How can we ensure students who have learning difficulties are not left behind? Actually, dito po pumapasok yung ating learner support, na halimbawa kung may mga learning difficulties sila, malalaman natin na they have learning difficulties and we can somehow personalize the learning experience to them. So katulad na sinabi ko kanina, probably depending on their learning difficulties, the learning support system that the university will put in place can address those learning difficulties and make sure that no students will be left behind. Kung halimbawa physically challenged sila, Then anong klaseng materials na ibibigay natin sa kanila? Na madali nilang ma-access, they can easily access the content. So learner support po ang sagot natin doon, so that all students will have this equity in learning outcomes. What is the ideal size for a college course? Actually, if you are doing the online instruction, ang ginagawa po namin, what we usually do at UPOU, we divide the into sections. Yung all students enrolled in a class, in a course, we divide them into section or group to facilitate the interaction. Kasi it is difficult to interact with 100 students, di po ba? So ang ginagawa namin, 25 to 30 per section, and that section or group, the interaction and the marking of assignments, giving feedback, is facilitated by one tutor. Or like in my case, I usually have more than 100 students in my class. So what I will do is I will divide them into groups, and these groups will interact among themselves. And it is possible that I will be getting a tutor to facilitate the online interaction of the students. So 25 to 30, both for even for asynchronous, so that we can maximize the academic interaction that will happen. And they will also be somehow familiar with each other. Kasi iba din yung interaction if the students are familiar with each other, even kahit pangalan lang at saka picture na nakalagay doon. So what strategies are most effective for helping you stay engaged with your peers and the instruction during remote learning? Ang sinasabi po namin dito, so that we can keep our learners engaged, is in designing the learning activities. So like for instance, in my courses, I have this student-led discussion. So I think we are also familiar with yung class reporting na ginagawa natin sa klase. I also do that in my courses. So I will assign topics to my students to report on, and then I will ask them to lead the discussion on the particular lesson na inireport nila. So in that way, all students will be engaged because they need to read, they need to prepare for their reports, and they need to also read so that they can interact actively with their fellow learners in discussing the lesson. Kaya nga iginugrupo rin natin sila. That's also the purpose of grouping them into sections. And in my case also, the online discussion is graded. So hindi pwedeng hindi nila gagawin yon. And in some cases, the final or the summative assessment can also be based on the kind of interaction, the discussion that happened during the semester. So you keep them engaged. You give them activities that will help them learn the content and achieve the learning goals. So reporting, collaborative work. I ask them to do projects that will somehow simulate what is happening in the real world, especially for those who are already working. We are using remote teaching and learning as prescribed through an LMS. However, assessments are limited. How do we ensure quality? Yung pong sa assessment, of course, there will be another session on assessment. But yes, one thing that we really want to ensure is even in remote teaching and learning, the integrity, we call it the integrity of the exam process, will have to be preserved or ensured. So ang ginagawa po natin, one, there are already platforms for assessment. But even in usual learning management system like Moodle, we can also have our assessment there. So, but again, the challenge in remote assessment is the design of the assessment itself. Hindi po pwede na ang mga sagot sa tanong mo ay pwedeng i-Google ng mga estudyante. Of course, if you are using an exam platform, pwede mo makontrol na yon. But in some cases, when you are not using an exam platform, pwedeng sabihin na habang nagsasagot ng exam yung estudyante, ay nag-google siya, pwedeng gawin niya yon. If you will design the questions in such a way that the answer cannot be Googled directly, the answer to your question na hindi niya pwedeng i-Google, then somehow kukuhanin ng estudyante doon sa kanyang natutunan yung kanyang isasagot doon sa question mo. So, at saka yung kung hindi din dapat pwedeng makuha doon sa open notes na ang mga sagot. So the answer here is designing and the strategies for assessment. There will be a separate module for that. It will be module for the teachers. It will be part of the teacher training that we have lined up also as part of this training program that we have prepared to address this shift. Is there any standardization in distance education that can be contextualized in designing can we possibly have a group activity for students in the remote learning? In terms of designing, merong kaming may mga sinusunod na protocol din. Hindi man protocol, kumbaga a recommendation in designing learning packages. Siguro general ang pwede nating ibigay, and then we can probably have some contextualization for the subject. I'm not so sure, I don't think I understand yung can we possibly have a group activity for students in the remote learning? Parang hindi ko yata nakuha yung question na yun, yung group activity. But in terms of designing the learning, again, yes, may mga standard tayong sinusunod dyan, may mga tips tayong sinusunod. And again, there will be a separate course na specific lang for designing instructional packages. So, doon lahat i-discuss ito at maibibigay ng detalye yung mga recommendation for the design of instructional packages and even designing learning. So, ilalagay natin yon doon sa kurso na yon. How do you manage the giving of feedback on students' assessment tasks submitted online? Medyo overwhelming nga, no? Ang ginagawa natin dito, again, when we design the learning sa mga estudyante natin in a course, we only give learning activities or ask our students to do those activities or learning activities that will directly contribute to the achievement of the learning goals. So lagi nating iisipin, ano ba ang kailangan nilang gawin para ma-achieve nila yung learning goal? And what are the activities that will lead to that? Diba? So iaano natin yan, i-design natin yan. Katulad nga ng sinabi ko kanina, sometimes parang ang dali kasi magbigay na activity kasi online, ibigay lang natin sa mga estudyante, we ask them to do, but we should always be asking ourselves as a teacher, is this activity, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of us asking our students to do this activity? Lagi natin itatanong yon. Halimbawa, we ask them to do collaborative work. Bakit? Bakit natin sila pinapagawa ng ganito? Ano ang kanilang dapat matutunan? At yung kanila bang natututunan, will it contribute to achieving the learning goal? In terms of giving feedback, may mga learning management system tayo na kasama yon sa mga pagbibigay natin ng yung nag-submit sila online, submission bin, and then i-assess natin immediately pagka bigay natin ng feedback, nakukuha na ng mga estudyante natin. And that somehow will tell them kung how they are doing academically. How they are doing. So halimbawa, mali yung assignment na ibinigay ko. So ano pa lang dapat kong gawin? Ano ang dapat kong matutunan? But then again, ano ba yung mga assignment na yan? Ano ba yung dapat nilang ma-achieve dito sa mga assignment na to na ibinibigay natin? So by having it online, mas mabilis yung pagbibigay natin ng feedback doon sa ating mga estudyante. Yung sa mga preschoolers, talagang malaking challenge po yung sa preschoolers natin. Dito talaga, ang lagi kong ine-emphasize dito, paano natin i-design? Ano ba yung kailangan nilang matutunan in the first place? Para saan ba ang preschool? Ano ang dapat matutunan ng mga bata at that point of their learning? Or bakit sila natin ipinapasok sa eskwelahan? Given itong mga ganitong learning goals, socialization, etc., ano yung ating dapat ipagawa sa kanila? Probably yung mga learning addition, subtraction, etc., baka maging secondary lang yon. Ang lagi nating iisipin, at that point in their studies, preschoolers, ano ang dapat nilang matutunan at bakit natin sila ipinapasok sa eskwelahan if the context is face-to-face instruction. At yun ang itry nating gawin, huwag nating i-overwhelm yung mga bata. Pero we will be, baka ma-surprise din tayo. For all we know, yung mga bata, mas techy kaysa atin, di ba? So, they will really go into the use of technology for learning, probably easier, faster than us. No? Holistic approach is a challenge. To embark on a holistic approach to this learning mode is a challenge, yes. What advice you have for DepEd top-level officials to embark on this alternative? And actually, ang DepEd naman, ako ang observation ko, I've been following this, the directives of DepEd. I think they are on the right track. And they are really doing everything they can, the top officials of DepEd, the top-level officials of DepEd, to ensure that everyone will still be included in this alternative learning delivery system. In fact, nakikipartner na sila sa DICT, sa iba't ibang mga organisasyon, iba't ibang mga ahensya ng gobyerno, just to make sure that this alternative learning delivery system will also happen with no one left behind at the basic education level. So ano naman sila? And they have a very comprehensive learning continuity plan. So hintayin natin kung ano yung ibibigay nila. I happen to to participate in one group of the learning continuity plan of DepEd. And I think they are covering all aspects and even all stakeholders. Again, let us not be too hard on schools. Let us not be too hard on our officials. As I mentioned earlier, we were not prepared for this. We are really looking at the different options that are available to us. And we are putting all possible options together so that we can ensure that learning will continue. So yun lang po. Let us give them time. Let us give them time to prepare. And also make sure that the platform, whatever platform that will be available. So that when school opens next year, ay may tutuloy natin yung pag-aaral. So let's just give them time. They are making the preparations. Even even TESDA they also have their own learning continuity plan. So let us give them this the time to give us the necessary directives on how we will proceed. Grading system, I think I have mentioned this already. At the basic education level, there was a point reading through all the situationaires on this shift to remote teaching and learning. I was really in favor of the pass or fail system, especially for basic ed, because as I mentioned earlier, probably at this point if we will be giving grades na mataas, mababa na grade, ganyan, we will probably be grading privileges. May tutor, may access sa internet, ganyan. Baka naman may mga learning objectives lang na pag nakita na natin na na-achieve ng estudyante, ay pwede na nating bigyan ng pass. At saka may mga eskwelahan naman na ganyan na wala na yung mga honor system, for instance. So that is something that we really need to consider. Yung wag na muna tayo magbigay ng ng numerical grade. For higher education, college students, that is something for universities to also think of. Shall we also do a pass or fail? Given also the situation. Although iba na rin yung situation ng college students natin kasi meron naman silang, malalaki na sila, they can also look for the resources if necessary. Pero still, we have to check na meron ding mga estudyante who are having difficulties accessing the internet and other support system that will facilitate the learning. So yes, something to consider. Kung na-meet nila minimum requirements, that's it. Pass. So, but it has to be discussed within the organization, like within the school. It has to be discussed within the organization. DepEd, for instance, it has to be discussed at that level. If there is no direct, halimbawa, sinabi ng DepEd, bahala ang mga eskwelahan, ganyan. Then it has to be discussed within the school system, especially kahit sa higher ed. If I may also cite an example, sa UP, may mga teachers na nag-opt na magbigay ng mass promotion. Na-meet mo yung minimum requirements, ipapasa kita. Hindi ako magbibigay ng numeric grade. So may ginawa po yan. And we provided the flexibility for the teachers in consultation with the students to make a decision in that regard. So kung nabalitaan nyo po, nangyari yan sa UP, na merong nagbigay ng mass promotion, pero meron ding nagbigay ng numeric grade. Sa UP-OU, lahat po ng teacher, naghihintay ako kung may magre-request na magbigay ng pass or fail. Actually, walang fail, mass promotion talaga. Kung may magre-request na teacher, wala naman po nag-request. So, ang ibig sabihin, everyone would be giving the final numeric grade to the students who will be able to complete the requirements. And this is, I think, meron pa dito, how do you monitor teachers' attendance in remote teaching? Actually, totoo po yan. Especially kung hindi naman po mag-o-online, yung ating mga teachers, yung sinabi ko kanina, yung first generation natin ng blended na like correspondence school. Siguro po, katulad ng ginagawa natin na monitoring sa ating face-to-face, that they will be submitting the progress of the students, ganyan. Sa online, madaling i-monitor ang attendance o ang trabaho, ang activities ng mga teachers. So like for instance, noong din ako, ang mga estudyante nagrereklamo sa akin kung ang teacher ay hindi nag-a-access ng kanyang course site. At ako as dean and even now as chancellor, I have the authority and the power to access yung mga online course sites in the university. At pwede kong tingnan doon, kailan huling nag-access ang teacher. Kailan siya nag-access. Even the students, I can monitor kung anong mga ginawa ng mga estudyante, gaano siya katagal sa course site, etc. So pwedeng ma-monitor yon. Sa case ng higher education institution, lalo kung graduate students yung hinahandle, nagre-reklamo ang mga estudyante pag ang teacher nawawala. Noong registrar ako, may isa ako natanggap na email from the student kasi yung teacher niya hindi nag-access ng napakatagal ng course site. Ang tanong sa akin, well, nagkataon din naman nakilala ko yung estudyante. Sabi niya, "Ma'am, nag-drop na po ba ang teacher namin? Kasi hindi po siya nag-access ng course site namin." So madaling ma-monitor kung anong ginagawa ng teacher. If it is online, kapag ka offline, walang online component, a reporting system on the progress of the students under the particular teacher can also be done kung ginagawa talaga ng teacher ang kanyang trabaho. So a system can be developed for that. I think this is the last question. May I request to complete so I can organize my time this week? Actually, ang ginawa po namin, as I mentioned earlier, yung executive course may 3 modules. Ang ginawa po namin, yung module 1, ang equivalent niya ay 8 hours. Kasi after this webinar session, meron lang simpleng activity kayong gagawin to complete the requirements. So ang pinroject namin dyan, you need 8 hours, but I don't think you really need that. Ni-extend lang namin. So about 8 hours, but after this session, you can do that asynchronously. So after this, pahinga ka muna, and then after that, balikan mo yung course site, and then you do the activities. Just one activity actually, just one activity for this particular module. Module 2 is the same, 8 hours for the quality assurance for remote teaching and learning. Yung module 3 yung mas mahaba. I think we allocated 16 hours for that because you already need planning, I think, ang magiging requirement. So ibig sabihin, ang ibig sabihin ay nilalagyan lang namin ng equivalent kasi ito rin po yung mag-a-appear doon sa certificate na ibibigay sa inyo. So like for instance, Module 1 has an equivalent of 8 hours, etc. Para pag ipinresent ninyo, especially for the teachers who are doing the training, pag ipinresent ninyo itong mga certificates as part of your CPD units, nakalagay doon ano yung inyong natutunan at ilang oras yung equivalent ng training. Kaya binibigay po namin yung 8 hours. But I don't think you will be needing 8 hours to complete Module 1, for instance. But that is something for you to schedule because after this, asynchronous na po yung paggawa ninyo noong requirement. Okay. So sabi dito, I think that's the last question. Again, kung meron pa po kayong question na hindi ninyo naibigay ngayon, meron pa kayong follow-up question doon sa naging tanong nyo kanina at nasagot ko, kung hindi po masyadong malinaw yung pagkasagot ko, we can post that doon po sa ating course site at doon ko po sasagutin ang inyo pang mga additional questions. I think that's also the advantage of attending the synchronous session like this. Again, let us look at this as an example that when we do remote teaching, this is one activity that we can do. But we have to be aware of the advantages and disadvantages of holding something on an online synchronous lecture like the one that we are having now. So what are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? And what are the options that we can provide to our students so that no group or no one student will be left behind. I mean, in terms of achieving the learning outcomes, sama-sama po nating mailalagay doon, ma-anchor doon sa ating mga estudyante. So, I think that's it. That will end our session. And I will see you online in our course site. Again, we will post it. We will post the link to the recorded material just in case you still want to go back to this session that we have now. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for listening. And I'll see you online on board our course site in Module 1. Thank you very much. Good day, everyone.